Welcome back, DIYers. If you want to learn an over-the-top, extreme way to replace your wooden fence posts, concrete them in the ground, constructed in such a way that they don't wibble wobble all over in the ground, and if in a future date they got to be removed, the next person doing so is cussing you up one side and down the other. Because believe me, they're going to need a little more than just water, a block of wood, a fence post, and a come along to get these out of the ground. Or would you like to just see the extremes I went to when I replaced my wooden fence posts? Well, keep watching and I'll show you how. After all, this is how I DIY. So as you can see, replacement of my fence is long overdue. The last rain we had came with some real heavy winds and blew down a couple sections. And when I repaired them, just to keep them standing, I had to screw some 1x2s on each side just to keep them up. Remember, I've got dogs and I got to make a temporary fence. So I'm going to take each one of these sections to make a temporary fence. Show you how I'm going to do that. Use my Sawzall with a bimetal blade. Got my dog fence put up. Oh, and in case you're wondering about buried stuff, don't. I called 811, that's what you call, and they come out and look for buried stuff. Told them what I was doing, and all I needed to map out was where my cable TV is. Now I'm replacing every one of these posts, whether you think it needs to be or not, but they're cracked. Some places they don't even hold screws anymore. Most of them don't even have any concrete in the base, and so they're leaning. So we're just gonna take them out and replace them. And if this don't work, I'm gonna have to do the old fashioned and dig the dang things out. I got my technique worked out. Get water around there, shake it around, get the water down next to it. Get my block set up just outside of the concrete. My post. Get my come along hooked up. Hook the come along into the chain itself. And away it comes. And there you go. I got all my posts pulled out this way. And honestly, it is very easy. I've got this post here in place, and I've got this top string that marks the reference to the top of the pole, and clear down there where that other pole was, but it's now gone. When I put it dead on top of that, the line across here was level. So knowing that from there I can go level clear to there, I took that post out. Also got this stake in the ground here with a string that marks the outside edge of this post. When I had this post in place, I used it as a reference to set this other pin right here. And then I've taken this loose here and just cut it off right here, because I'm gonna have a double post right here. And when it's all said and done, I'm probably gonna take this post out and extend that to my new post. Then this section of fence here, I'll start with that post and go that direction. These lines here, this outside white line here and here marks a reference for a pad that you'll see a little bit later in the video as to why. But I went through and marked, this is the 7-foot mark, and that's the center mark. And you can see some of these, like that's the center mark right there for that post, and you can see they're off centered. That's okay, I got a plan for that. So the next thing I need to do, run down to the rental store and get me a post hole digger. Okay, I got my 2-man post hole digger here. I wound up getting an 8 and a 10-inch bit. I thought I might have to use an 8 to get up in there, but it looks like we might be able to use this 10. I got my lovely wife to help me, even though she didn't want to be on camera. So we're gonna give it a whirl. Alrighty, well, that 2-man post hole digger did not work. The clay in this ground is so hard, I'd get down maybe a foot, 18 inches at max, and it'd bog and you couldn't get it to turn. No matter how much we lifted up and down, trying to get it to drive in, we might get 2 foot at best, and it just wouldn't go through this thick old clay. But as you can see here, some of these holes, the old holes, are quite a bit off from where they need to be. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, just dig the holes you know, just leave the holes where they are and put new posts in. Well, in a little bit here, you keep watching, you'll see why I couldn't do that. So I got this big old beast. It's got a 10-inch bit on it, and we'll see how well this works. Alrighty, here we go. The hardest part is to make sure you're going down straight and not cattywampus. Looks like we're right in the center too. I need at least 36 inches, and that's up to the hub of this. For those of you that are wondering, and those of you that aren't, what I've done is I've taken the dirt out of the holes I've drilled and put them in these old holes. Took a 4x4 post because it's got a smaller footprint and packed the living snot out of that dirt, clay, mud, whatever. And then when it gets towards the top, I take my 8-inch packing plate and pack it also and get it really good and packed tight so that when it goes to drill, it'll drill a new hole where it needs to and won't veer off into the old hole and drill. This auger actually works pretty good. You just have to kind of go slow and don't let it take off in there too fast or it'll bog down and go all kinds of crazy sideways. And when it gets so far down, I'll show you what I have to do also. The hardest thing is to keep everything square. As this goes down, you got to move the machine back. So it really helps to pull the dirt away as much as I am, because otherwise when it gets past this is about 2 foot. When it gets past there and it sinks down, you can't lift this thing out. To back it out, it gets stuck and you really fight it. Now, these blocks are designed when it hits this, it just stops there and digs as you saw, and it pulls the dirt up out so I can rake it away. And I turn it down to here and do the same thing, and then eventually I'll just let it go to the ground. And that's where I get my 3 foot. The other thing I do is I take this post hole digger and go in there and fish some of that dirt out also. 2 or 3 of them, as I'm showing you here, I had to actually come back and hand dig a little wider because when I drilled, instead of it drilling straight down, it drilled kind of an angle, so I had to widen it up so that it had straight sides. Then the 1 post hole down here at the very end, I had to dig for a double post, and I did that. And now I got this center line marked here. I'm gonna take a sod cutter and cut a trench down the center here that straddles these holes. You're asking yourself, what the heck for? Stick around and you'll see. Okay, this is a 12-inch sod cutter, but from outside to outside of the wheels is about 17 inches, which means there's 2.5 inches of wheel outside the cutter. Now I need 10 inches at least, but 12 is going to be perfect. And like I say, I need 3 inches below grade. So what I'm going to do is I got to cut 27 inches wide, remove all that dirt, then because the cutting depth is based on where the tires are. And the deepest it'll go is 1.5 inches. And so I cut 27 inches wide, that way it all fits down inside there. I think I'm gonna cut like 1 inch. And I'm gonna drop it 1.5 inches and cut what will fit in, what, you know, the wheels will fit inside at 27 inches, which then gives me like a 17-inch strip in the center, for which this can ride right in the center, and cut my 3rd path all the way down to get my 3 inches below grade. So basically why I did this is I'm not going to just pour concrete in the post and then have the dirt come over it. Instead, I'm going to have a square form that's 10 by 10 around each post, and I'm going to pour to about grass level when it's cut. Why, you ask? Why go through all that? Well, I'll tell you. 1, it looks nicer. 2, because I'm doing it myself, I can afford to do that. 3, so when I use the weed eater, I just don't whack against the post and the fence pickets. That's why. And I just think it looks nicer. So I'm using the machine to cut my depth, because I'm gonna make it about 3.5, 4 inches thick. the square around the top. And versus having to hand dig it, this is working a lot faster. Oh, and just so you know, just because you call 811, they come out and map out all your electrical lines and stuff, don't mean they got them all. Found this little guy right here. It's 5-6 foot away from where they told me it should be. They didn't say nothing about this clear out here, and what do you know, when I cut through it, we lost all cable and internet service. And I'm finally ready to start trying to set some posts. Now I got the back edge of these two outer fence posts marked, and that's roughly the straightest I could get it. The posts are kind of leaning over here, but it's just what it's going to have to be. And then this other line that goes all the way down, it touches the very outside edge of that far post down there, and I've got it set to here, as I had some leftover of this packing gravel from when I did the raised flower bed, and put about an inch, no more than 1.5 inches in each one of these holes. And then I'm going to take this old post here and pack it down really well. Then we're going to set a post, and this 2 intersections will be my outside corner, and then I've got a level on it. I'll get it plumb and straight, and then I've got another string line that'll come down and mark dead center, so I'll have it all perfectly lined out. Now I know, depending on who you listen to or talk to, they say you don't have to put this in there, but I had it left over, so I'm using it and I'm putting it in there. I want the post to barely touch these lines. I got my height leveled with this post to that post. I'm about 1.5 inches high here, which you can kind of see from here, but I'll show you down there. That's okay, because they got a post at the gate that's probably 1.5 inches too high versus everything else. So what I've done is I've taken an old post, ripped it in half, got it attached here, and then I took broken post, cut them into fourths, made spikes, because I want this to be up off the ground a little bit. I can see when the post hits the string. Same thing, just till it touches the string. This is set beautifully. It's off just a hair, and I'm OCD and gotta do it. Here's my center string. So all the posts from here on just barely need to skim underneath this, and they'll all be level. All right, there's a slight change in plans. Originally this post was up this high, and I was just gonna make everything level off of this, and I would just deal with having to put all these posts higher. But after further thinking, I decided no, because it's gonna throw too much off with everybody else's houses. So I found out this was about 1 9/16 too high. So I cut off 1 9/16 inches, reset it up. It's level with this post. I got my center line. I got it all put back together. Now, I thought I was gonna have to cut 1 9/16 inches off every post before I put them in. Am I so thankful I didn't do that, and I just threw one in to see. Because as you can see, every one of these posts is lower than my string line. Now what I did do, in that far end down there, bump that end up by 1 inch. And it makes this so close to level, it's not even funny. So I'm gonna leave it at that, because I want that post a little higher anyway. So this one's just a hair too high, so there. I want it to just barely set it underneath that string line. And before you get all critical, I know I'm overkilling, but I'm the one doing it, so I don't care. And this fence post is gonna last. Perfect. Okay, so here's one of those posts that's 4 inches too low. So I cheated a little bit, and I cut a 1/2 inch off the post. The post is actually 8 3/4 inches long, but That's what I want. Alrighty, I'm gonna finish up these last 3 posts and then start the next part. You would think it's anchoring these in, but it's not. Hang with me, you'll see. In case you're wondering, I'm gonna number these so I put them back in the same holes, because I figure each post is custom fit to the hole. This next part is gonna be extreme to some of you and may turn you off, but hang with me here, and I think you'll understand why I'm doing it. Before I set these posts, I've got to get a line set as to where the top of my concrete's going to go on the post. And the reason is I'm going to pour a base around each one. That's kind of a decorative thing. Some of you are probably sitting there going, why did you drill bigger holes? Normally you just need 8-inch holes. True. I knew I wanted this base 10 by 10, but when I was looking up on how to figure out how much concrete each hole was going to take, I come across a little tidbit that said that your hole should be 3 times the size of your post. Well, if these are 3.5 times 3, that's 10.5 inches. So that's why I did 10-inch holes. And I went 3 foot deep. The old posts were leaning here and there, and they were only down 2 foot, and they had a smaller base. So I'm hoping with going 3 foot, a bigger base, these stay in place. And here where I'm at in Texas, my soil is very clay-based. And in the summer months when we don't get much rain, that stuff dries up. I mean, this year was really bad. I had what looked like fault lines through my yard because it dried up so much. And so there's a lot of movement there. And with that movement, I'm hoping that doing the overkilling what I'm doing, these won't start to do it also. And it's kind of the same reason I'm doing this next part. Hang with me, just stay with me. So I need to find out a line as to where the top of this box is going to go on each one of these so I can take a measurement for 2 reasons. One, I'm going to tar the bottom of these posts. Yes, I've seen where you can buy these sleeves and heat shrink them on there, but they look kind of ugly to me sticking out. So I'm going to tar, but I need to know where the top of this box is going to go because I'm going to tar 2 inches above that. The reason is they tell you that where things rot is right at the edge here where that water sits. So by going 2 inches up, I'll have that protected. Now, the biggest reason, just hang with me, the biggest reason I need to know where this is because I got to measure for rebar. Yes, I'm putting rebar in here. And I'm doing rebar and mesh. And a lot of it has to do with these boxes because I want these boxes really well reinforced so they don't crack, crumble, and fall apart in 1 year. And so with rebar, that's what I'm going to hopefully, and wire mesh, prevent that. And because I don't want to just do rebar up here. Yes, I can pour concrete and put my little rebar wire mesh thing in and put on top of it. But I'm going to use a stinger. I call it a stinger. Some people call it a vibrator to vibrate this concrete so that I don't have any voids in this box when I take it off. So it's nice, smooth concrete all the way around with no air pocket voids. And by doing that, that thing will sink. So I need to know from the bottom to where I'm going to stop, how deep that is for my rebar to be cut. What I'm going to do is have my rebar and mesh stop about 1 inch above where the top of this is going to be. So I've got this string here, runs all the way down, and I've got it so that it just barely started touching this post, and when I put it in down there, it did the same thing. So I'm going to use this string to measure where the top of my little square pad's going to be on each post. I'm going to have this at about 2 inches, and so that way I'll just weed eat right at it, mow, it'll look great. So that's what I need to determine, ground level plus 2 inches. And what I'm going to do is set this string to that here and down there. Now the ground has a slope to it, which means I can't make this level because it'd be like 4 inches up or 5 inches up here to make 2 inches down there, and I don't want to do that. So that means when I set my square blocks, they're going to be at a little bit of a tilt to account for the slope. And then I'll leave this line in place because that's what I'll use when I go to set the forms as to where they go. The hardest part is telling what's ground level. I could call right here, I guess, ground level. When I talk about ground level, I mean where the grass starts to grow out of the dirt itself. If anything, I can err to it being just a little higher than I want. Yep, that's 2 inches right there. Ground level is right there. Right there it is. So the top of my form will be right there. Let's take each post, set it up where it touches that line. I'm gonna go through, mark the rest of these. One additional thing I'll need to do, which is gonna be such a headache, and I should have done it beforehand, but I really wasn't thinking. And I gotta take this post out before I pour, because concrete from this post is gonna interfere with that. And I thought about pouring this post and then taking it out, but I'm afraid with my cap, it won't come out. And I don't feel like digging a hole and tearing up my new concrete. So the other thing is I don't want these posts so close together, and I'll just redo to here, one board for the neighbor. So I got them all laid out here. I clamped them together because one of them's got kind of a bow in it, and I clamped them together so A, it won't get any worse. B, maybe as it dries here in the sun, it'll go back in shape, but you know, it's a long shot. So anyhow, here are the lines I made. So from here to here, the way this line steps up is about 3/4 to an inch over 75 feet or so, so not bad. So I got them all even at that end. And you can see down here we got, these are all 8-footers, that one's longer, 8-footer, short, 8-footer, 8-footer. So I took from the longest measurement, about 36 1/4. So I'm gonna make all of these 35 inches long. Now I know down here, this one is number 1, which is the closest towards the house, is 35. And it's gonna be too long if I do that. But instead of making custom cuts, I'm gonna make them all 36 inches or 35 inches, and I'll just tap these into the ground to get my inch below. So here's my wire mesh, and I got this mapped out. There'll be an inch from each side, and this block will wind up setting in there, like that. And that way all I gotta do is make my cuts. Okay, I got all 8 posts cut out of one sheet. And then this here, I may not have told you, but by the way, that last post clear at that end is going to be a double post. I just don't have them put together. And this is the wire to go around that. So out of one sheet, I got all these. Now, time to cut rebar. So my rebar is 3/8, or they call it 3 bar. Each number is an 8. So I've taped them all together so it's easier to do. And I just go through here and mark. And then got my circular saw set up here with a metal cutting blade. By the way, keep your legs out of the way because them sparks do get hot. Duh. If you remember, I made a line on every post where the 2-inch mark is above ground level. And from there, I made a 2-inch mark above that. Remember, my concrete's gonna come to this mark. I want my tar 2 inches higher than that. And so I made a 2-inch mark all the way around. And I made it parallel to how this is sloping. Once I put tar on this, I won't be able to see it. So what I'm gonna do is I put tape right up to this line. I put it on first and put it all the way around. I'm just covering this line. Then I just take a third piece and cover the gap. Here's my tar, if you will. Basically, it's Henry's sealer and damp proofer. It's a water base. I wanted an oil base, but here where I'm at, I couldn't find any. So this is what we got. And smear it on. You know, the hardest part of all this is gonna be not getting it on myself when I go to put the post in the ground. Just like that, the post is tarred. All right, it's time to build my little cages. I've already got 4 of them done, as you can see here. So I got 12 pieces of my short rebar, 4 of my long. Now you can get what they call wire ties or concrete ties or rebar ties. Basically they're a piece of wire and on the end's got a loop. You take a twister and put it in each side and just twist them together. And I thought about getting them, but the thing is that they didn't have any short ones, all they had was long ones. I basically just bend it in a V and I wrap it around, make an X, grab it with my wire side cutters, give it a twist, choke up on it if you will, and twist, and it gets it tight There's a fine line between too tight and just tight enough. You see how I twisted that, and it wants to pull this wire out like that, and it makes it a little loose. So this wire went around this direction, okay? This one I'm going to take this direction, opposite, and it'll pull against the natural twist that it's wanting to do and help tighten it up, just like that. I've got my fence posts all put in the holes where they need to be. Remember, I numbered every one of these and they're back in their holes. Got my cages in next to each post. Before I can start setting these with the braces and that, I gotta get me a jig made for distance. So each one of my posts are gonna be 7 foot apart, or at least that's where they're gonna start at from the far end. This last one's less than 7 foot. That one won't matter. So what I want is I can get plumb and straight and all that, but it's the distance between them that I need to get set and make it even. And so for that, I'm gonna make a jig. And basically, I'm gonna take this 8-foot 2x4 here. The very first post way down there, it's gonna be a double post, but I only got one end for right now. So I gotta count for that. So I got a piece of 4x4 scrap block here that I'm gonna use to mark off from the second post of that 2-post fence there. Needs to be 7 foot to the next one. Not 7 foot from the first part, or the first of the post, but the second post. 7 foot spread marked out. I got my circular saw set up to cut about 5/8 of an inch deep. I want this as a pretty tight fit. I don't want a lot of slop. So I got my grooves all cut out. Fits in there pretty nice. There's about a 1/16 inch of play already. I got my post leveler, meaning it levels in 2 directions. I got my string set for the back side. When it touches that string, I just barely want this to touch that string and this to be level and plumb in both directions. Now it sets up high because remember, I'm going to have a square base. Just touches. Now let's see how we're sitting. I like it. That's perfect. It's a little tedious by yourself. Be nice if the ground wasn't like concrete. But again, I can see when it barely touches that string. Dead on. All right, I got these 2 sets. And from outside to inside ought to be 7 foot. And we're about a 32nd off. I can take that. Now for these others, you see I got a brace at the top I've screwed in just to kind of hold my distance. Then we'll get started on getting these boxes. So I'm just using some pine 1x8 here, and the deepest one that I need to have out there is 7.5 inches. And that's because from here to the ground is a different height for each one. As you can see, about 6 inches below here. It's because when I did the sod cutter and cut this groove in here, I cut it too deep and deeper in some spots than the other. But I'm okay with that. So because of that, I got to make my forms different lengths, and I've got them all mapped out for each post. So what I've done is I've made up a stop block here for these boards so that I can have consistent lengths. And this one's set up for the 11.5 inch. I've already done it for the shorter boards. You should always cut the end off of your board first because they're not necessarily square from the factory. And I just slide this up, it touches my stop block, and cut. And just like that, all the boards are cut. So I got all my measurements wrote down on this piece of paper, and basically I'm just going through and transferring them to each block. 2 means the second post, and the next number is however wide it needs to be. And I'm just grouping them together like that until I get all 8 of them done. So for my first one, it's 5.5 inches. I got my blade set up, and I'll run these 4 boards through and continue on until I get all 8 of them done. With my pieces all cut, it's now time to put them together. I'm gonna use pocket holes because one, I'm gonna have to pre-drill holes anyway because all I got is deck screws, and if I don't, it'll split all this anyway. So I'm gonna have to drill holes. I might as well just drill pocket screws. So I've got my jig here. I've got this set a little less than what it tells you to for 3/4 material. And because of that, I'm gonna have to use 1.5" screws. I went and got me one of these little doohickeys. And by not drilling as deep as they recommend, I got a lot more meat to screw to, and that's why I did it that way. And in case you didn't know, with pocket screws, to get your greatest strength, you want to drill or you want to screw it to where you're going into the meat of the wood and not this direction where you're coming towards the outside, because it's not as strong. Got all my 10x10 boxes built with the pocket screws. The other thing I did was make this placement centering jig. What I do is I take pocket screws out like so. Then I slide this down underneath here like that. And so it'll sit just like this. So I got this play. The play is designed to go that direction. And I got my string line, and basically I raise this box up until the string line touches, just barely touches on both sides, like so, and I anchor it in place. Now, what I have to do first is, you see I've got a gap here, I've got a small one here. You don't see one here, and that's because of the hole size of my box. Probably should have made these boxes, this is 12 by 12s, but I didn't because I'm encroaching on my neighbor's property some, and well, I didn't want them to all of a sudden go, no, I don't want that, and have to take care and get rid of all of it. So I just made them 10 by 10. So all I do is grab some scrap pieces of wood. I got all kinds of little scrap pieces of lumber around here. In this case, 2 2x4s, and I just cut them to fit. Now in this case, I've got to make it so it fits in between the pocket holes so I can get in there and reattach this. Because on this side, I'd make it longer. I just set it on here. I drill holes so again, it doesn't split. Alrighty, let's slide the box in. It is kind of a monstrosity looking thing, isn't it? And the other thing I do, I want it level this way. It's not going to be level this way because from there to here it's kind of got a small slope. So I just want it level across this way. Tie it against the post. And I kind of use these stakes to wedge it in place. The other thing I do is I make sure it's below the level of this, so when I float. So now all I gotta do is put a stake here and here, because I like to have 2 on each side. And then the last thing before I can pour is fix that in double post. Okay, I got my 2 posts clamped together here. And I forgot I cut this one, so I'll have to cut this one to match. But basically I'm gonna put 3 bolts in, one here, one about here, and one about here. And they're 7" half-inch bolts, 7 inches long, with washers. On the other end I got a washer, a lock nut, and a nut. And it's all galvanized. So what I'm doing is taking an 1.5" Forstner bit, because that's the diameter of the washer, and going down about a 1/2 inch so that this sits below there. So when this is all bolted, this will sit below flush. And I'll do the same on the other end. The big hole drilled out, and I'll do that on each one of these. And then I'm gonna come back with a 1/2 inch bit, and where this point is on this Forstner bit, that's where I'll put the tip of this, and I'll drill through this post and into this one and make a dimple, drill through it. And before I get to the bottom of that, when I just start seeing the point of this pop through, I'll stop and then use this Forstner bit to come the other direction. And to make sure I go straight, I'm going to use this little jig here so that I go straight down, because I don't have a drill press. So I have just a few little odds and ends I gotta get done before I can pour these. One of them is I gotta get this post pulled out, because as you see, if I pour it with it in, it's gonna interfere with my new pour, and I probably won't be able to get it out. And then I'll have to come back behind and pack that hole. I've got a way I'm gonna do that. And oh, by the way, I forgot to turn my sprinklers off, and so 4 of these holes are full of water. I'm gonna have to pump those out. So I gotta get these tarred, put back together. Then I've got to build the box for it to go around. Then we're all set to pour. As you see here, I'm tarring all the way up the post on the 2 sides that are going to wind up touching each other when I bolt it together. So then make sure I lock out all the water and it doesn't rot between them. Now I'm going to use clamps to clamp this together really tight. The bolts, the nuts, the washers, everything is galvanized. And in case you missed it, I took a brush and tarred all down inside them holes really well too. The bolts are going to stick a little proud of the post, and I'm okay with that. I made sure to put them where my cross braces wouldn't be. Okay, I got my post set in. I put this 7 foot, spacer board up, put it back in the exact same hole it was in before. So now I know from here to here is my 7 foot on center. Because what I need to do now is make sure my top is back where it was, because all these other posts got set off of this. And what I did before I took this down is I screwed in a screw here so that when this string barely touched it, that's where it should be. So when it barely touches that, it should be touching this. I'm hoping at the least I got to put a little of this pack in there and raise it up and not dig it out. Okay, I need to go down just a little bit. Just a fraction low. And I'm going to leave it and get it set these directions. Well, got to put the cage in first, huh? I got my top spacer block set. I got my post leveling put on. I got my bottom string set for the edge of the post. So I'm going to go through and get this post set, get the braces put on. Then the next thing I'll have to do is build the box to go around it, and we'll have this thing ready to pour. Well, this baby is finally ready to pour. It's taken way longer than I thought, but that's what happens when you build it over the top. Now, as you see, I got all my posts retarred where they needed to be, got the tape pulled off. As you can see, I got all my posts set where they're just a fraction off or just barely touching the center line string on each one. And if you look down the center, all of them seem to be in the center except for the far two. And for some reason, I don't know why they wouldn't sit in the center of this and be level and plumb and everything. And then at the bottom, you see I got my string line set where the post just barely touches the string. And then the last thing I've got is that my boxes are just up underneath the string. In fact, they're off just a hair. I got my box made from my double post, got it all tarred and set. So I went through and made sure all the cages were 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches below level. That way they don't float up through the concrete. So with that, tomorrow is going to be pour day. We're going to get all 9 of these holes poured. So it's the next day. Got my water hose hooked up. I got my buckets here. I got a water hose out there where I'm going to work. I got a magnesium float, an edger, and another little handy float. And yes, being over the top, I got a concrete vibrator because I'm going to make sure I don't have any air bubbles in the box when I take it off. Let's get started with this and see how much fun it's going to be. Oh, this is not going to be fun. I'm ahead a third bag, that's way too watery. This is a much bigger stinger than I wanted. I wanted a smaller head, but go with what you got. That last batch was way too runny, but that's okay, I got it done. Remember when I said good thing I had 50 bags? It's taken roughly about 6.5 bags to a hole. I'm not gonna have enough. I'm probably gonna be about 10 bags short. Oh well, I'll just have to run to the Home Depot and get more. But on we go. It's the next day. Time to get all these braces off and all the boxes undone. See how well a job we did. It took 45 80-pound bags to fill these. That's roughly 5 bags per hole because I got 9 holes. That's 3,600 pounds of concrete that went into this little project. Concrete's all set up and turned out pretty good, if I have to say so myself. Now, I do have a couple patches that I got to do, but you'll have to subscribe to the channel if you want to see those in an upcoming video. And the posts are very, very, very solid in the ground. They don't move other than the flexion of the wood. And my tarred areas, they held up really well. And my posts are nice and straight and plumb in 2 directions, as you can see here with the level. And they all look to be in a fairly straight line. When you look down the edge, the tops of the post all look to be in a straight line and centered and at the same height. Now I do have one issue, and there's nothing I can do to fix it. It has to do with the finish. These are all floated with a magnesium float. What I really wanted was a steel trowel finish on all these when I was done. But in trying to get all these poured in a day, it took a lot longer than I anticipated to do it. So by the time I got the last one poured and went back to the first one, the concrete already hardened too much and I couldn't steel trowel it. I even tried sprinkling some water on it to see if I could get it to loosen up, and it just wouldn't do it. But it looks okay and I'm happy with it. And with that, if you want to see another project where I take it to the extreme, click on this playlist where I do the house painting series. Or if you just want to see another outdoor project, you can click the link down here. And until next time, happy DIYing.